There are moments in human history that do more than kill or destroy. They rearrange memory. They change the way entire societies think about safety, power, faith, and the future. They force us to learn the hard way, sometimes painfully, sometimes slowly, sometimes after the damage is already done. This is a catalog of 22 such moments. They're not ranked by cruelty or scale, but by impact on lives, institutions, and on the way we see the world afterward. Some of these stories are fast, brutal flashes. Others creep in, a slow trauma that poisons a generation. All of them are lessons we still haven't fully learned. Stay with me. I'll keep the lights low and the story tight. The Great Smog of London, 1952. Silent, invisible, deadly. December in London. A cold snap, coal fires in nearly every home, and a weather inversion that trapped pollutants over the city. People went about their routines. Shops opened, buses ran, while a lethal cloud built, centimeter by centimeter. By the end of 4 days, hospitals overflowed with choking victims. Cars slowed to walking speed. Pilots aborted landings. Official deaths were tallied in the thousands. Modern estimates pushed the figure far higher. After this event, governments learned that pollution isn't an abstract problem. This smog led to real policy change, the Clean Air Act, and a brutal lesson: what we burn and how we hide it can be a killer. So the next time you see a whole city smog photo, remember people actually suffocated quietly in their beds. Jonestown, 1978, the price of absolute control. Imagine a leader who promises utopia, then narrows the world until there's only one choice. That was Jim Jones. He convinced followers to move to Guyana for a social experiment. Isolation followed, then paranoia, then coercion. On November 18th, more than 900 men, women, and children died in a mass suicide murder. They drank cyanide-laced punch. Scenes from the aftermath are brutal. Garden hoses, tiny hands, bodies slumped in white plastic tarps. Why this matters, you ask? Well, cults aren't just weird corners of society. They reveal how authority and isolation can override critical thinking. Jonestown rewrote how the world understands coercive control. An interesting fact is that the audio tapes from the final hours exist, and they are a study in how panic and obedience can coexist. Hindenburg, 1937. Flame and the death of an era. The Hindenburg drifted in for landing, graceful, gleaming, the future of air travel, and then, instantly, it became a wall of flame. The famous radio call, the grainy footage, the smell of burnt fabric, it's the moment when optimism collided with catastrophe. 36 people perished. A dream of lighter-than-air passenger flight died with them. Why this is so important is because technological optimism isn't immune to physics. The Hindenburg became a symbol for the fragility of progress. Now people wonder what caused the ignition. For decades, the debate, static electricity, leaking hydrogen, sabotaged wiring, keeps historians arguing. Halifax explosion, 1917. Accidental devastation on an industrial scale. 2 ships passed in a narrow harbor. One carried explosives bound for World War I. Miscommunication, collision, and boom. The blast leveled whole neighborhoods, generated a tsunami, and blew people into the air. Thousands died. 12,000 buildings were destroyed, and the blast was heard hundreds of miles away. Hospitals were reduced to rubble. Surgeons made amputations with broken tools. Why does this matter? Well, military logistics and tight spaces are lethal if handled carelessly. The Halifax explosion forced port safety regulations and emergency planning protocols. What's most frightening is that survivors described windows exploding like sheets of glass fall from the sky, and that image keeps you with the story. Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, 1911. Locked doors and lost lives. Workers locked in, flames outside. Hundreds of young women were trapped on the top floors as doors stayed bolted to prevent theft and production discipline. They jumped, they burned. One by one, the stories of the young victims became a national outrage that birthed labor laws, safety codes, and the modern fire escape. This tragedy stands out because the way people died because profit margins trumped human life, a motif that repeats in tragic headlines to this day. A single photograph of children in makeshift graves after the fire was a historical turning point in public sentiment. The Black Death, 1347 to 1351, a pandemic that redrew borders. The plague didn't just kill people. It collapsed economies, broke feudal systems, shifted power dynamics, and birthed a cultural reformation. Trade stagnated, labor shortages made surviving peasants valuable. Cities emptied, then filled with new orders. The scale, tens of millions. The suffering, unimaginable. The social consequence, the end of an era. Why this matters is that pandemics aren't only medical, they're social accelerants. Just remember, when entire villages vanish, what's left behind is often more instructive than what's recorded in chronicles. The Great Famine in Ireland, 1845 to 1852. Starvation and emigration. Late blight ruined the potato crop, a staple. But the famine's cruelty was amplified by political choices. Food was exported while people starved inland. Eviction and boatloads of emigration followed. 1 million died, another million fled. The diaspora reshaped global demographics. This shows the world that natural failure plus policy neglect equals catastrophe. What's even more shocking is that letters home from immigrants captured the raw desperation from the families, and those letters moved history. The Challenger disaster, 1986, an O-ring and human ambition. Engineers feared launching in the cold. Management pushed forward anyway. 73 seconds into flight, the Challenger fragmented. 7 lives lost. A teacher among them, the first civilian school teacher slated for space. This tragedy is important because ambition, without deference to basic engineering, is lethal. NASA's safety culture changed, but the lesson was written in blood. On that day, a nation saw the explosion on television and felt collective grief like no other. Deepwater Horizon, 2010. Oil, fire, and an ecosystem wounded. An offshore rig exploded. 11 workers died. For 87 days, oil gushed into the Gulf. Birds, fish, marshlands, all were stricken. Fishing communities lost livelihoods. Tourism collapsed. This happened in result of our hunger for energy, which we came to find out the hard way has ecological and social costs that last for decades. People noted that the smell of oil coated beaches. Volunteers pulled tar-coated pelicans from surf in heartbreaking scenes. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1945. Dawn of the nuclear age. Here's one I'm sure everyone learned in school. It started with a blinding flash, then a pressure wave that flattened building after building, and a radiation sickness that lingered for generations. The death toll was enormous. In weeks and months following the bombs, researchers say approximately 140,000 people lost their lives. This event showed the world that the use of nuclear weapons shattered the moral imagination of war. The aftermath of this tragedy ensured survivors' shadows, silhouettes burned into walls, which remain haunting artifacts. Bhopal gas tragedy, 1984. Poison in the night. A pesticide plant leaked methyl isocyanate gas into a sleeping city. Thousands died within days. Many more suffered chronic illnesses for decades. Corporate negligence, abandoned safety systems, and muted accountability made this a slow-burning catastrophe. What stood out was the fact that industrial risks are local, immediate, and intergenerational. During and after this event, victims reported babies born with deformities. The land itself still bears scars. Bengal famine, 1943. Famine in a colony. Wartime policies, market decisions, and hoarding turned a crop shortfall into a catastrophic famine that left millions dead. Food was loaded onto ships even as people starved inland. This event is important as supply chains and governance decisions can translate scarcity into slaughter. Imagine the haunting accounts of mothers selling children for a single meal. These images won't leave you. Indian Ocean Tsunami, 2004. An ocean that forgot to warn us. An undersea megathrust earthquake whipped a corridor of water into a tsunami. The water pulled back, exposing a temporary ocean floor. People walked out, curious, innocent. Then a wall of water returned and erased them. Over 230,000 lives across a dozen countries. Coastal resorts, fishing villages, and entire communities dissolved into memory. Did this change the world? Well, yes, warning systems and international cooperation matter. The world responded, and slowly tsunami monitoring expanded, but the loss was already permanent. Still, to this day, some survivors speak of watching the sea retreat and thinking, briefly, that they'd been blessed with a rare sight. Rwandan genocide, 1994. 100 days of horror. Organized slaughter, neighbor against neighbor, a machinery of death fueled by hate radio and propaganda. Over 800,000 people killed in roughly 100 days, often by machete, often with police and civilian complicity. This was one of the most devastating as the international system failed to act, and the price was human lives in mass. If you ever wonder, how does propaganda escalate to genocide, the Rwandan archives give chilling answers. Lisbon earthquake, 1755, when faith was shaken. An earthquake struck during All Saints' Day, catching people in churches. Fires raged, and a tsunami finished the city. The death toll, tens of thousands. The philosophical toll, massive. Enlightenment thinkers used Lisbon as evidence that suffering could not be explained away easily by providence, and the event fed the flames of philosophical revolution. Why it matters is that tragedy can accelerate intellectual re-evaluation, but also just sit and imagine being there and witnessing holy sites collapsing with worshippers inside. It ruptured more than stone. Pompeii, 79 AD. A city frozen in motion. We need to go way back in time for this one. The catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius occurred without the modern warning system of satellites or seismic networks. Ash rained, then pyroclastic flows erased the city, preserving entire household scenes in plaster casts. This shows us that sudden geological events were ancient too, and their archaeological echoes are haunting. Still, plaster casts reveal faces frozen mid-scream, a visceral reminder of final moments. Armenian genocide, 1915 to 1917. Forced death marches. People marched into deserts, villages emptied. Over 1 million Armenians died through deportations, starvation, and murder. Memory wars continue to this day. This is crucial because the ways states can just weaponize displacement still remain modern concerns. An interesting fact is that survivor memoirs survived the marches and became the testimony that keeps this piece of history honest. Chernobyl, 1986. Radiation, secrecy, and the cost of denial. A late-night test, a safety protocol ignored, and an explosion that ejected radioactive particles into Europe's atmosphere. Firefighters died trying to put out invisible flames. Residents returned unknowingly to contaminated streets. Long-term effects included radiation sickness, cancer spikes, and a swath of abandoned towns. The zone is now a quiet forest where nature has complicated the human absence. This is important because nuclear energy's shadow isn't just risk, it's the political choice to hide or reveal. Did you know that the Soviet cover-up made the medical impacts worse? Secrecy costs lives. 9/11, 2001. A fracture in modern life. This went down as the biggest terrorist attack in history. Well, according to the West. The televised collapse of the Twin Towers created a trauma with global ripples. Wars, new surveillance regimes, and a generation of veterans carrying wounds on return. 4 planes were hijacked and flown into the buildings and 1 into the Pentagon, resulting in the death of thousands. However, this event holds some sketchiness behind it with all the conspiracies of the dancing Israelis and the documents the wave war on Afghanistan 3 months before the attack. Oh, and let's not forget about the insurance claim policy. This attack illustrates how modern interconnectedness amplifies trauma and response. This attack heavily impacted today's world. Airport security lines forever changed, the quotidian aftermath of a single morning. The Holocaust, 1933 to 1945. Industrialized murder. A bureaucracy of slaughter. A modern state using trains, paperwork, and factories to kill millions. 6 million Jews and millions more of Roma, disabled, LGBTQ, political dissidents systematically murdered. Why it matters? The Holocaust is the ultimate cautionary tale about unrestrained ideology and the perversion of science and administrative power. However, this one also holds many theories, one being that Hitler didn't actually kill 6 million and that the number was heavily exaggerated. Others have even gone to say that he was protecting Germany from Jewish superiority. But this will also be part of history that will remain a mystery, because remember, the winners write the history book. Nevertheless, to this day, diaries, photos, and piles of victim shoes speak louder than any statistic. The Titanic, 1912. Unsinkable hubris. Here's a classic that we all know. The RMS Titanic. The beauty was a statement of human mastery, which sadly met its demise when a huge iceberg penetrated the side of the ship, causing it to flood. It sank because structural design, ignored warnings, and social inequities combined. Women and children took priority in lifeboats, but many lifeboats launched half full. The most interesting thing about this one is the many conspiracies aligned with it, one being filthy rich businessmen taking out their competition. But I guess we'll never know. This shows us that technological triumph without humility becomes disaster. Here's one for you. Watch a class map of lifeboat distribution and you'll see the inequality stamped into ice-cold facts. Cumulative human error, the pattern we keep repeating. If we step back from these events, we see a pattern. Not a single ghost or villain, but a recurring failure. Arrogance, neglect, political calculation, economic priorities, secrecy, and denial. These tragedies are not isolated. Many are different faces of the same human weaknesses. We rush, we hide, we prioritize short-term gain. We forget that complex systems, cities, reactors, supply chains, communities are only as strong as the attention paid to them in calm times. This is the most chilling tragedy because these are the lessons we almost learn. The reforms passed and then eroded, the warnings given and then ignored. History writes its lesson in blood, and we sometimes only read the headlines. Think of one safety rule you've ignored recently. That tiny choice sits in a long lineage of decisions that scale into disaster. Why we watch these stories? We watch because we want to understand. We watch because horror sharpens insight. We watch because the human stories inside the statistics are profound. People who loved and were loved. People who were startled mid-meal by a wave or a knock. People who held hands as smoke closed around them. If you took anything from these tragedies, let it be this: our progress must be matched by humility. We must invest in safety before eruptions and equations suggest danger. We must listen to engineers, not spokespeople. We must treat the vulnerable as priority when crisis arrives. And maybe, not because we deserve it, but because it's our only option, we must keep building systems that catch our mistakes before they become massacres.